This time, questions about the overlap between her State Department and the Clinton Foundation. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Chris Wallace in for Bret Baier. Did Hillary Clinton, as America's top diplomat, give special treatment to people who gave big money to the Clinton Foundation? That's the question tonight following the release of more emails Clinton's team did not turn over to the government last year. Correspondent Rich Edson on what critics are calling a pay-to-play arrangement.
Clinton political donors and former Clinton Foundation officials pushed the U.S. State Department for meetings, favors, and jobs for associates, while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. This, according to nearly 300 pages of work-related emails Secretary Clinton failed to initially surrender to the State Department and just released as the result of a successful lawsuit from conservative group Judicial Watch.
They extract these promises from Mrs. Clinton to stay out of foundation business, to have a bright line and a wall between the State Department and the foundation. Doug Band was communicating with the State Department to take care of, quote, associates and, in one case, a major donor.
Doug Band is a longtime advisor to President Bill Clinton. He led the Clinton Foundation's Clinton Global Initiative, and on April 22, 2009, he forwarded to Hillary Clinton aides Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills an email from an associate looking for a job entitled, quote, a favor. Band instructs Abedin and Mills the matter was, quote, important to take care of. Abedin responds almost immediately, quote, we have all had him on our radar. Personnel has been sending him options. The State Department refuses to identify the contact or say if the person in question received a job, only adding officials are confident they followed all the rules in this case. A few days later, Band emails Abedin and Mills again. Quote, we need Gilbert Shogary to speak to the substance person regarding Lebanon, adding the issue was very important. Abedin assures Band she will discuss the issue with the then American ambassador to Lebanon. Shogary is a Nigerian businessman of Lebanese descent and a longtime supporter of the Clintons. The Clinton Foundation says he has donated between $1 and $5 million. The Clinton campaign claims in these emails Band was acting as an advisor to former President Bill Clinton, not as head of the Clinton Global Initiative. In a statement, a campaign spokesperson says, quote, neither of these emails involve the secretary or relate to the foundation's work. They are communications between her aides and the president's personal aide. And indeed, the recommendation was for one of the secretary's former staffers who was not employed by the foundation. Clinton defenders say the former Secretary of State and Democratic nominee engaged in no wrongdoing.
These emails were between staffers. This was not Secretary Clinton involved in this discussion. Second, here's what American people hear about Hillary Clinton in this issue. Emails, 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 blah, 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 blah.
And this afternoon, Judicial Watch released more emails, including one from 2012 showing officials informed Clinton's then chief of staff, Cheryl Mills, of a Freedom of Information Act request. They were asking for the number of email addresses Secretary of State Clinton used. Chris?
Rich Edson reporting from the State Department. Rich, thank you. Donald Trump is not backing down, insisting his comment yesterday that some interpreted as a threat to Hillary Clinton was nothing of the sort. And he's hoping gun rights supporters will have his back. Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron is with the Trump campaign tonight ahead of a rally in Sunrise, Florida.
Trailing in Virginia polls, Donald Trump, who says Hillary Clinton would abolish the Second Amendment, dug in today.
We have to protect our Second Amendment, which is under siege. Remember that. Remember that. It's under siege.
For the second day in a row, Trump's attempt to rally those he calls Second Amendment people to block Clinton from appointing liberal judges dominated the campaign trail, and Clinton herself weighed in.
Yesterday, we witnessed the latest in a long line of casual comments from Donald Trump that cross the line. His casual inciting of violence. Every single one of these incidents shows us that Donald Trump simply does not have the temperament to be President and Commander-in-Chief of the United States.
Trump's facing bipartisan criticism for this remark yesterday that some thought could incite violence.
If she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is.
Trump insists he was calling voters only to political arms.
You look at the power they have in terms of votes, and that's what I was referring to.
The National Rifle Association immediately announced a $3 million blitz of attack ads on Clinton.
Protected by armed guards for 30 years. But she doesn't believe in your right to keep a gun at home for self-defense. An out-of-touch hypocrite.
The NRA backs Trump, and even one anti-Trump Republican shot down Democratic charges that he was inciting violence. Susan Collins of Maine, the 6th Republican U.S. Senator to denounce Trump as unsuited to be president, said she took the remarks as a rally cry to activism. House Speaker Paul Ryan, who's endorsed but often criticizes Trump, said he thought it was a failed attempt at humor. Republican defections to Clinton continue. Former George W. Bush administration Director of National Intelligence John Negroponte, former Secretary of Commerce Carlos Gutierrez, and others are now touted on the Clinton webpage under the banner Together for America. This afternoon, CNN reported that the Trump campaign and Secret Service had a conversation about the remark yesterday, and that the Trump campaign said that there was no intention to incite violence. Donald Trump himself this afternoon tweeted that no such conversation has taken place, and the Secret Service maintains only that they are aware of the remark. Chris?
Carl Cameron with the Trump campaign in Florida. Carl, thank you. House Speaker Paul Ryan easily defeated his primary challenger last night in Wisconsin. Ryan pulled in 84% of the vote against Paul Nehlen. The challenger received a boost near the end of the race with a positive mention from Donald Trump. A federal appeals court is blocking a lower court order allowing Wisconsin residents who have trouble getting a photo ID to vote after signing an affidavit affirming their identity. Civil liberties groups say the decision disenfranchises vulnerable citizens. A second court ruling creating another way around the voter ID requirement remains in effect, but it's also being challenged. Hillary Clinton is focusing on the Midwest. She made 2 campaign stops today in Des Moines, Iowa. Tomorrow, a major economic speech in Detroit. Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel sets the scene from the Motor City.
Hillary Clinton is back in battleground Iowa with an eye on expanding the electoral map in November. In Des Moines, Clinton toured a T-shirt company owned by Mike Draper, emphasizing small businesses are the engine of our economy.
I've been talking a lot in the last few weeks about the need to get more good jobs with rising incomes for more Americans. But part of that has to be helping more people like Mike start and grow businesses and create the conditions in which they can be successful.
The latest Marist poll has Clinton leading Donald Trump 41% to 37% in Iowa. In Ohio, Clinton holds a 5-point edge in that survey. And in Pennsylvania, Clinton is ahead by 11. It's worth noting Clinton and running mate Tim Kaine won on a bus in Ohio right after the DNC in Philadelphia. So Clinton is actively trying to sweep the Rust Belt from Trump.
This is one of the big differences that I have with Donald Trump. I have many big differences with him, but one of them is that he makes all these things. He doesn't make any of them in the United States.
Clinton is looking to compete in Arizona and Georgia, which are typically red states. The campaign is planning to hire staff seeking to put those states in play. Clinton's also eyeing Utah, which hasn't gone for a Democrat since 1964. She wrote an op-ed in the state's second-largest newspaper making reference to religious freedom and the Constitution and mentioning the 2012 Republican nominee, quote, listen to Mitt Romney, who said Trump fired before aiming when he decided a blanket religious ban was a solution to the threat of terrorism. Clinton continued that GOP outreach at a rally late today.
I am humbled and moved by the Republicans who are willing to stand up and say that Donald Trump doesn't represent their values.
This sets the stage for that big economic speech by Clinton here in Michigan tomorrow, just days after Donald Trump gave one in Detroit. Clinton will try to convince those frustrated by their economic opportunities that she understands and has solid ideas to help them. Chris?
Mike Emanuel reporting from Detroit. Mike, thank you. Donald Trump says he will participate in 3 debates with Hillary Clinton this fall, but he is not happy about some of the arrangements. Correspondent Kristen Fisher tells us why.
The last major party presidential candidate to back out of a general election debate was Jimmy Carter in 1980, refusing to share the stage with independent candidate John Anderson. And after Richard Nixon's disastrous debates with John F. Kennedy in 1960, there were no presidential debates between Republican and Democratic candidates for the next 16 years. But in 2016, for a Republican nominee to bail on the debates would be a gamble of historic proportions.
Donald Trump needs to be in those 3 debates because, from an electoral college standpoint, he's really starting out from a position of catching up. So he can't afford to miss one, I don't think. He's got too much ground to make up.
Trump already skipped 1 debate during the primary. He also claims to have single-handedly renegotiated the length of another debate from 3.5 hours down to 2. Now, Trump tells Time magazine he'll, quote, absolutely do 3 debates, and that he wants to debate, quote, very badly, but he wants to see the conditions first. He also told Time he's reserving the right to pull out if he doesn't like the moderators who have yet to be announced. Earlier, he said he didn't like the dates because 2 of them were at the same time as football games.
Hillary Clinton wants to be against the NFL. She doesn't, maybe like she did with Bernie Sanders, where they were on Saturday nights when nobody's home.
The Clinton campaign says it is not clear if he's trying to avoid debates or merely toying with the press to create more drama. Either way, our campaign is not interested in playing along. We will accept the commission's invitation and expect Donald Trump to do the same. That commission is the same independent, nonpartisan commission that sponsored every presidential debate since 1988.
The Commission on Presidential Debates has set these debates up months in advance, over a year in advance, and they say there's really nothing they can do, that they're really not in a negotiating position.
As of now, the commission says it has no plans to meet with the Trump campaign, though that could change. What is in the works is a meeting between the Trump and Clinton campaigns, and that should happen sometime over the next few days. Chris?
Kristen, thank you. This highly unusual presidential race is having a trickle-down effect on other big contests in November. Case in point, the New Hampshire Senate race. An incumbent Republican is having a hard time in her bid for re-election, and a lot of people are blaming Donald Trump. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal reports tonight from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte hosts a forum on veterans' health issues, part of a busy public schedule as she fights for her political future in one of the tightest Senate races in the nation against Democratic Governor Maggie Hassan.
I know we can do better, and I want to bring the kind of work ethic and pragmatism and commitment to problem solving that we have here in the Granite State to Washington so we can move our whole country forward.
I wake up every single day with a sense of purpose to work as hard as I can on behalf of the people of New Hampshire. So there are always challenges thrown at you, but it's worth it.
Onward to victory in November.
3 months before the election, polls show the race is essentially a dead heat. New Hampshire typically leans Democratic in presidential election years, and Hassan's numbers have risen as Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump has widened. But Ayotte gets a bounce as the incumbent. She's actually doing better than Trump here and trying to distance herself from him, while Hassan is endorsing Hillary.
I support Hillary Clinton because she and I have been working for the same thing, expanding middle-class opportunity, helping our small businesses, keeping our country safe.
Ayotte's walking a fine line.
I've said clearly I'm going to be voting for him. I'm not endorsing him. I have disagreements with him, which I've been quite vocal about, and I'll continue to do that.
And her reluctance towards the Republican nominee hasn't skipped his attention. Just last week, he told the Washington Post, "She's given me no support," and implied she's, quote, weak. Both Ayotte and Hassan are treading carefully because neither presidential candidate is well-liked in their home state.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are the 2 least popular candidates that have ever run for president in the 20th century, non-incumbents. And in New Hampshire, their unfavorables are both about the same. About 60% of the voters in the state have unfavorable opinions of both candidates.
Andy Smith says this race is simply too close to call and will likely be the most expensive political battle in New Hampshire state history, with millions of dollars pouring in from out-of-state donors hoping to influence the outcome. Chris?
Rick Leventhal reporting from Manchester, New Hampshire. Rick, thank you. Senator Ayotte is sharing an unclassified report she got from the Pentagon about the militant backgrounds of the detainees still housed at Guantanamo Bay. She says President Obama is planning to release more dangerous terrorists. The administration is set to transfer 34 of the remaining 76 detainees to other countries. Well, as you may have seen, a man is right now climbing up the outside of Trump Tower in New York. Let's go to Shepard Smith at the Fox News deck for an update. Shepard.
Chris Wallace, we've been watching this all afternoon. And of course, the moment you come to us, the picture goes down. But here's what's happened. About 3:45 this afternoon, so 2.5 hours ago, a man started climbing the outside of the Trump Tower building. Some guy walks through the lobby, tells security, there's some guy climbing the building. They went out there, and sure enough, he was. By then, he was at the 6th floor. They put inflatables down. Our friends at ABC7, the local ABC station here in New York City, report that they saw in his backpack some paperwork that had Donald Trump's name on it. He's just taken the backpack off, and he's just been climbing up the building. We're told he's up about the 15th floor now. The police have been negotiating with him, as they put it. They've knocked holes in the walls and the glass, pulled the glass out, and been saying to him, you know, you got to come down, trying to negotiate an end to this. And they say they're just going to wait him out. If we were to pan up now about 2 stories, you'd see that the police have removed a window, and they're just waiting for him to get there. The question is, will he go around the side of the building to avoid them? This is a wider shot of that. There are the 2 police windows that have been opened up, and this is the climber down here. So this is the south front of the building, and this is the 5th Avenue side. Chris, 2.5 hours later, he's still climbing.
Say it's about time.
Every year, Nevada homeowners spend $16 million to help subsidize 17,000 customers who put solar panels on their roof, but not for much longer. In a controversial move, the state's Public Utility Commission, or PUC, is phasing out that subsidy over the next 12 years.
Let's hear it one more time for solar. Give it up, people.
Solar customers in Nevada now blasting the state's decision to phase out net metering, the incentive program that reimbursed residential customers at retail rates for excess power generated by their rooftop panels.
The PUC and Governor Sandoval have backstabbed us and have gone against, supporting us, the little person.
According to solar activists, the new rules mean customers' utility bills will increase by 50%, meaning some will end up paying more than had they not gone solar. Many customers said they wouldn't have shelled out thousands of dollars to install rooftop panels if they had known they'd be hit with higher fees, and blame the Nevada Public Utility Commission for what they call a bait and switch.
We don't hate solar.
Paul Thompson, head of Nevada's PUC, says the net metering perk was unfair because it meant homeowners who didn't have solar panels were subsidizing those who did.
As the rooftop solar industry has gotten larger and larger, we've seen this subsidy grow. And what started as a legislative policy to kickstart the industry, now 18 years later, it's time for that industry to stand on its own 2 feet.
This warehouse used to be completely full of solar panels and inverters.
But as a result of the new policy, many solar companies say they're having to downsize due to a lack of customers. And several, including Solar City, have stopped doing business in the state, eliminating more than 500 jobs.
Activists are now hoping state lawmakers will allow customers who went solar before the PUC's decision will be able to keep the rates they signed up for. And they're also fighting the new policy in the courts. It is a legal battle that other sunny states like California and Arizona are watching closely. Chris?
Claudia Cowan reporting from Reno, Nevada. Claudia, thank you. American police have just stopped that man who was climbing the Trump Tower in New York City. They've arrested him safely, brought him inside. Let's go to the Fox News deck and Shepard Smith for the latest.
Chris, it happened just less than a minute ago. The man is climbing on these suction cups as he's moving them up, and a police officer just reaches out and grabs his arm. I think we can turn the video around for you. This happened, I don't know, a minute and a half ago or something. We were doing this on Facebook Live. Gave him a little nudge there, and then just sort of dragged him into the building. It happened very fast, and it was over just like that. The police were a bit annoyed. As it turns out, this guy has put a video message on YouTube to Donald Trump. It was posted yesterday. We believe it's he, where he says, Donald Trump, here's why I'm climbing your building. I want your campaign to know some things. I'm going to get word to your campaign, but it's essential that we talk. So I don't know. Is this a wackadoo? Is this a guy with some kind of legitimate message? There's no way to know at this moment. But for 2 hours and 45 minutes, he climbed a building, Trump Tower, at the corner of 56th Street and 5th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. and we've been watching him the whole time. Here's the video again of that as it went down just a little while ago. Just kind of grabbed his arm, the one cop did. They've been talking back and forth the whole time. He's like trying to stay away, but that wasn't possible to do. Snatched him in the building, and Chris Wallace, it's all over.
And Shep, just a question. What they did is they took out the window there on, what is it, about the 17th floor of the Trump Tower?
21st.
21st floor, and that's how they were able to get access to the climber?
Yep. On the left side of your screen, that's the west-facing front of the building. That would be right on 5th Avenue, where the sun's setting. They have window washers there, those big window washers on ropes, and cops on the window washer scaffolding. Then they opened up windows all around it with police in there, so he really had nowhere to go. He could have gone down, but there was no more up opportunity for him, and he just appeared to try to go along that window thinking maybe the cops won't reach out and get me. That was the wrong thing to think. They did so in pretty quick fashion. But 2 hours and 45 minutes later, he's got to be tired, probably glad to have a place to sit down.
Well, and you too, Shep. Thanks so much for the latest.
Yep, we'll continue this on Facebook Live because the police are going to have a news conference in a minute. Thank you, Chris.
You bet. Talk to you, buddy. All right, let's bring in our panel, not to talk about people climbing towers, Trump Tower or any other, but to talk actually, well, all right, let's see them first. Then we'll tell you what they're talking about. Charles Lane from the Washington Post, editor of LifeZette, Laura Ingraham, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. And in the time in this first panel, we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and the question as to whether there was some kind of a pay-to-play arrangement between the foundation and Hillary Clinton and her top aides at the State Department. Laura, you know, this nexus between the foundation and the State Department has never gained the political traction, let's say, of the emails or of Benghazi. Do these latest set of emails, does that change that? Is it going to make it a bigger deal?
Well, one would think it should under current federal corruption law, where it states that if a federal official receives anything of value in exchange for changing federal policy or federal action, you could be held liable. In this case, perhaps we'll learn more with other email releases. But one thing that's clear in the release of these emails is that, boy, when you give $1 million to $5 million to the Clinton Foundation, you can really cut through the bureaucracy fast. I mean, that Mr. Whatever it's Gowdery or Chowdhury, Shaggery, he was able to cut through all the way to Huma Abedin. They were able to connect him with the Assistant Secretary of Near East Affairs. And apparently, it went from there in a phone conversation. Now, what happened in the phone conversation, we don't know. But it's clear that the Clinton Foundation was a conduit for influencing federal officials at the State Department. Again, to what extent? We don't know. Is it just to get a job? Is it just to get a meeting, a hearing on a future project? This is what we always thought might have been at the heart of this Clinton Foundation email issue.
All right. Let's remind folks, give you an example of what we're talking about. And here is an exchange, and let's put it up on the screen, an email exchange in 2009 between Doug Band, who was a top official of the foundation, as well as President Clinton's personal aide and top Clinton aide Huma Abedin. Band, I'm going to do a dramatic reading here. We need Gilbert Shaggery, who was a top donor to the foundation, to speak to the substance person, Ray Lebanon. As you know, he's a key guy there and to us, and is loved in Lebanon. Abedin email. It's Jeff Feldman, who was then the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon. I'm sure he knows him. I'll talk to Jeff. Pan, better if you call him. Now preferable. This is very important. Chuck, big deal, small deal, no deal?
I think it depends a lot on what was so important and what was the matter involving Lebanon that was so urgent that, as Laura suggests, the usual bureaucratic hoops would not do, that you had to go straight to the top in this way. And of course, another thing that will make a lot of difference is whether Hillary Clinton herself knew about this or got involved directly one way or the other. So far, there's no evidence of that. It's interesting to point out here that Doug Band and Huma Abedin aren't at arm's length. I mean, they're in business together, if I remember the story.
They weren't then, but they are now.
But they are later on. I mean, this is a very interlocked group of people. One of the things that the Clinton campaign tried to say in defense of this was that Doug Band and all of this was just acting as an advisor to Bill Clinton. That was the hat he was wearing, not as in his role as in the Clinton Foundation. And I'm not sure.
I was going to say, that explains how complicated this all is, because they're making a distinction, some would say a Clintonian distinction, between Doug Band advisor to the president, and Doug Band, who was a top official at the Clinton Foundation. Same Doug Band.
Yeah, and what difference does it make? Because that former president is the husband of the Secretary of State. I mean, it's all just kind of one big kind of ball of mush.
Now, we should point out that the Clinton Foundation, and even basically, in effect, in an interview with me about 10 days ago, Secretary Clinton said that there's never been proof, there's never been a smoking gun, there's never been evidence that she did anything quid pro quo, made any decision as a result of any foundation gift or any speaking fee to her husband. Here's the reaction to the latest batch of emails from Donnie Fowler, who's a former official in the Clinton administration. Take a look.
These emails were between staffers. This was not Secretary Clinton involved in this discussion. Second, here's what American people hear about Hillary Clinton and this issue. Emails, 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 blah, 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 blah. Emails, 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 blah, blah, blah. It's already baked into this election. This isn't going to really change the direction of this race.
Charles, I never thought I would ask you this question, but blah, blah, blah?
Look, I think this guy's whistling in the dark. This is, I think, can be quite ominous. There are two questions that have been outstanding forever. The first is, what exactly does the foundation do? I know what Habitat for Humanity does. I know what the Gates Foundation does. It is obvious that it was a huge networking operation, funding, supporting, and giving jobs to the entire Clinton retinue, waiting for her accession for the Clintons to return to the White House. And the second question is, why did she have a private server? I have always speculated here, and I said it was pure speculation, that the real stuff, the reason she had to hide all this, obviously she meant to hide things, was because there is something having to do with the foundation. And that's where you would put all the so-called private stuff. It wasn't yoga lessons or wedding invitations. If there was anything about improper connections, and we see them here, this is just a hint of it. This is a few emails. What was in the 30,000? If anybody gets their hands on them, Russian or not, they could come spilling out stuff that could destroy her candidacy. She knows what's in there. But if anything, it's the connection between the foundation and what she did as Secretary of State. Whether there was a direct quid pro quo, I think, is irrelevant. We're talking now not about criminal activity, but the political effect, and it could be devastating.
Laura, let me ask you, because as I said, Secretary Clinton and all of her top campaign officials and aides from the State Department say, look, there's no smoking gun here. There's been a lot of investigation. A fellow, Peter Schweitzer, wrote the book Clinton Cash. Yep. There's no quid pro quo, at least hard evidence. Does that make a difference?
Yeah, well, I think, again, it probably would be somewhat persuasive if indeed there weren't so many missing emails. If she hadn't lied to, you know, when she discussed turning over all her emails, as we know Jim Comey said she didn't tell the truth on that. So maybe if we had all those emails and all that communication was in the public, then maybe we could take her at face value. But I think the big question mark now is what was in those emails, as Charles said. And I bet some of them had something to do with the CGI, the Clinton Global Initiative. I've always thought that, and you know, maybe we'll know, maybe we won't.
All right, panel, we have to take a break here and participate in 3 presidential debates, but with some conditions. And we're back now with our panel. So, Chuck, this is interesting because Trump sounds like he's going into a negotiation, the art of the deal. But the fact is, the Commission on Presidential Debates, which has sponsored every debate in the general election since 1988, says it doesn't negotiate, that it names the venue, it names the date, it names the moderator. There's no negotiation. Question, who's going to blink, the commission or Trump?
Well, I don't know what leverage Donald Trump has. If you're going to negotiate successfully, you've got to have leverage. And he claims to have negotiated successfully in the primary debates based on the fact that he was the guy who got all the ratings, right? But these debates in the fall do not have commercial interruptions. There's no ratings issue for the people who are sponsoring them. You can't sell more airtime for commercials based on whether or not Donald Trump is in it. Furthermore, he's losing in all the polls. And usually the loser is in no position to dictate the terms, needs the debate more. So I'm mystified as to exactly where he thinks he's got the upper hand here.
One of the things that Trump is complaining about is the fact that two of the debates are going to be up against NFL football games, but given the fact that they're on Sunday, Monday, Thursday, it's pretty hard to avoid a date when there's an NFL football game. And let me show you, in fact, because this has happened before. In 2012, the last Obama-Romney debate was up against Monday Night Football. The debate got 59 million viewers, football 10.5. The second debate that year, 2012, between Obama and Romney, up against baseball, 65 million to 6. And in 2008, the third Obama-McCain debate up against baseball, 56 million to 8 million. So, Laura, there's really not much competition. Presidential debates beat sports.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, maybe he just doesn't want to miss the games. I don't know at this point. He is a football fan. I think the more interesting question here, Chris, is what the Republicans have been concerned about in the past. Remember Romney in the national poll average, I was looking back at this before the show, was 6 points ahead going into that Candy Crowley debate. And everybody remembers the, do you have the transcript Candy moment on Benghazi? And people were furious. Candy Crowley ultimately said that Romney had a good point, except in the wording of what he said about the act of terrorism.
But let's just point out that in the debate, she seemed to side with Obama.
Right, exactly. So that infuriated Republicans, and some people believe that really turned the tide against Romney. I don't know if it did or didn't, but Republicans have had a lot of concerns about, and Mitt Romney said this himself with you last year. He said that there's a focus on issues that are highly divisive and end up having people pulling away from us. He was referring to the Republican primary debates. That's why they limited the scope of their debates. So I don't think there's any big, surprise that someone could raise an issue. But in this case, unlike the, pre-primary debates, there really isn't much room for anyone to run here.
Charles, I want to get back to Chuck's point. I wonder about the leverage. I mean, if you're going to make the deal, and as I understand the art of the deal, you got to have something that you leverage over the person you're negotiating with. He's behind in the polls. He's down in the swing states. It seems to me if he were to huff and puff and say, well, maybe I won't participate, Hillary Clinton and the commission would say, go ahead.
But this isn't like the negotiation of a real estate deal that either is going to happen or not. I think what this can do for a Republican, for Trump in particular, is to influence how the debate commission goes about in the one important issue. It doesn't really matter if you're up against the NFL. That's a side smokescreen. The real issue is who moderates. And the Candy Crowley moment, I don't know if it was a decisive one, but it was shameful. She clearly took the side of Obama, and she was wrong, which made it even worse. So I think it's very important for the commission to think very hard about who would be acceptable to both sides. Generally speaking, the media overwhelmingly liberal. So if you're going to take a random sample, you're going to get liberal moderators who will try to be objective, but in the end, it's very hard to be. So I think it's important to make the point that we're going to be watching very carefully who the moderators are, and if they are unacceptable, you can say, I'm not going to participate unless we get somebody else. Ask a bunch of respected, retired judges to be the ones who choose.
Retired judges? This is like the John Sirica case. We're out of time. But
don't have a stake in the game.
And that's it for the panel. Stay tuned for a different way to view the 2016